Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. The Signal. I've been the caretaker at the Blackwood Point radio tower for 3 years now. Not much of a job, really. Check the equipment once a month, make sure vandals haven't broken in, clear any debris after storms. The tower hasn't been operational since 2009, when the digital transition made these analog relays obsolete. The power company keeps minimal electricity running, just enough for the warning lights at the top to keep planes from crashing into it. It's a lonely spot perched on the edge of a cliff overlooking the Pacific. The nearest town is Millport, about 15 miles inland. The isolation is why I took the job. After 2 tours in Afghanistan and a divorce that left me with nothing but nightmares, I needed somewhere quiet. Somewhere I could hear myself think without the constant noise of humanity pressing in. The company that owns the tower, Meridian Communications, keeps it maintained for tax purposes or something. I don't ask questions. I just cash the modest checks they send each month and enjoy my solitude. Or at least I did enjoy it until 3 weeks ago. I was making my usual inspection, checking the perimeter fence and making sure the main door to the broadcast building was secure. Nothing seemed out of place. The 3-story concrete structure stood as it always had, weathered by decades of salt air, with the 300-foot steel lattice tower rising above it like a metal spine. Inside, everything was as I'd left it the month before. Dust gathering on abandoned consoles, empty coffee mugs left behind by technicians who'd walked out years ago. The faint smell of mildew that never quite goes away no matter how much I air the place out. I was about to leave when I heard it, a sound I shouldn't have heard, static, just a soft hiss at first, barely audible. I followed it to the main broadcast room, where rows of equipment sat dark and dormant. Except one monitor was lit up. A single VU meter bounced gently, registering an audio signal. That was impossible. The equipment hadn't been powered on in over a decade. The station's broadcast license had expired. The transmitter had been partially dismantled, yet there it was, the needle jumping in rhythm with the static. I approached the console cautiously. The static shifted, became more complex, almost like breathing, in and out, then it stopped. I stood there for several minutes, waiting for it to return. Nothing happened. I checked the power cables, found them disconnected. The equipment shouldn't have been receiving power at all. I chalked it up to some kind of electrical anomaly. Maybe a power surge had momentarily activated old capacitors, creating a ghost signal. I made a note to mention it in my monthly report and left. That should have been the end of it. 2 days later, I was at my cabin about a quarter-mile from the tower, reading by the fire, when my radio switched on by itself. Not the digital one I used to check weather reports, but an old analog unit I keep around for emergencies. The same static filled my living room, breathing static, then barely audible beneath it, a voice. ... coming back. I nearly knocked over my chair getting to the radio. By the time I reached it, the static had stopped and the radio was off again. I told myself I was imagining things. The isolation was finally getting to me. Maybe I needed to drive into Millport, have a beer at the local dive, remind myself what other humans sounded like. Instead, I called my supervisor at Meridian, a woman named Karen who had spoken to maybe 3 times in as many years. The equipment's all decommissioned, she assured me after I described what happened. There's no way anything's broadcasting from that tower. Then someone else must be using the frequency, I said. Impossible. The FCC reallocated those bands years ago. If someone was broadcasting illegally, they'd be interfering with active services. We'd know about it. She promised to send a technician out within the week, but I could tell from her tone she thought I was overreacting, or worse, making it up. That night I dreamed of the tower. In my dream, it wasn't made of steel but of bone, and it swayed in the wind like a living thing. At its top, where the warning lights should have been, a great eye blinked down at me. I woke up drenched in sweat, the sound of static filling my ears even though all my electronics were unplugged. The technician arrived 3 days later, a young guy named Marcos who looked barely out of college. He spent an hour at the tower with various instruments, checking for rogue signals or power anomalies. Everything's dead as a doornail, he concluded. No unusual electromagnetic activity. No power where there shouldn't be. He glanced around the dusty broadcast room. Place gives me the creeps though, like being in a tomb. You don't know the half of it, I muttered. He gave me his card before leaving. Call if anything else happens. Weird stuff can occur around old broadcast equipment. Residual energy, you know. I didn't know, but I nodded anyway. That night I decided to stay at the tower. I brought a sleeping bag, some food, and my laptop. If something was happening with the equipment, I wanted to document it properly. I set up in the broadcast room, positioning my chair where I could see the console that had mysteriously activated. Nothing happened for hours. I dozed off around midnight, only to jerk awake at 3:17 a.m. according to my watch. The static had returned, louder this time. The VU meter was active again, its needle swinging wildly. But that wasn't what had woken me. It was the voice beneath the static, clearer now. "We're coming back through." I fumbled for my phone to record it, but the battery was dead, though I'd charged it fully before coming. My laptop was dead too. Even my watch had stopped at 3:17. The static grew louder, filling the room like a physical presence. The needle on the VU meter hit the red zone and stayed there, vibrating with strain. Then one by one, other pieces of equipment began to power on. Lights blinked on consoles. Tape reels that hadn't turned in years began to spin. The veil is thinning. The voice was masculine but distorted, like someone speaking through water. I backed toward the door but found I couldn't move past a certain point. It was as if an invisible barrier had formed around the broadcast equipment, and I was trapped inside it. We found a way. The temperature in the room plummeted. I could see my breath clouding in front of me. Frost began to form on the metal surfaces of the equipment. Through the frequencies, the static changed pitch, becoming a high, keening sound that made my teeth ache. The lights in the room flickered, then went out completely, leaving only the eerie glow of the equipment displays. "We're so hungry," and then it stopped. Everything went dark and silent. The invisible barrier vanished, and I fell backward through the door, scrambling away on all fours like a frightened animal. I spent the rest of the night in my truck, doors locked, engine running. When dawn came, I drove straight to Millport and checked into the town's only motel. I called Karen from the motel phone and told her I quit. "Mr. Reeves, please," she said, using a tone one might take with a child. "We can't just replace you on such short notice. Why don't you take a few days off, clear your head?" "Something is wrong with that tower," I insisted. "Something unnatural. It's a metal structure with some old electronics, Mr. Reeves." "Nothing supernatural about it. I know what I heard," she sighed. "Look, take 2 weeks, paid leave. When you come back, we'll have had the entire facility inspected. If there's anything unusual, anything at all, we'll address it." I needed the money. My pension only covered so much, and jobs were scarce for someone with my particular set of skills and issues. 2 weeks paid to do nothing was a good deal. "Fine," I agreed. "But I wanted in writing that you're going to have specialists check the place out, not just some kid with a voltage meter." "Of course," she said smoothly. "Enjoy your break, Mr. Reeves." I spent 3 days in Millport, drinking too much at the local bar and sleeping fitfully at the motel. On the 4th day, curiosity got the better of me. If something was happening at that tower, I wanted to understand it. I'd faced worse than strange noises in Afghanistan. I drove back to my cabin first, half expecting to find it disturbed somehow, but everything was as I'd left it. I collected some supplies, flashlight, extra batteries, a crowbar, though what I thought I'd use it against I couldn't say, and my old service pistol. The tower looked the same as always, silhouetted against the afternoon sky. No signs of any inspection teams having visited. I approached cautiously, scanning for anything out of place. The perimeter fence was intact. The main door was locked as I'd left it. Inside, the broadcast building was silent. Dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight coming through the grimy windows. I made my way to the broadcast room, pistol drawn, feeling foolish but unwilling to take chances. The equipment was dark and silent, no sign of the activity I'd witnessed days before. I ran my hand along the console, feeling nothing but the expected layer of dust. Had I imagined it all? Was Karen right? Was I just a burned-out vet having some kind of episode? I decided to be thorough. I checked every room in the building, then climbed the maintenance ladder inside the tower itself, checking each level. Nothing unusual. Finally, I reached the top platform where the warning lights were mounted. From there, I could see for miles, the endless expanse of the Pacific on one side, the rolling hills leading to Millport on the other. The isolation that had once comforted me now felt oppressive. I was a tiny speck clinging to a metal skeleton on the edge of the world. As I turned to descend, my radio crackled to life in my pocket. I hadn't even brought a radio with me. The static was back, but different now, wet sounding like something moving through mud. "We see you." I yanked the radio from my pocket. It wasn't my radio at all, but an older model I'd never seen before. As I stared at it, the casing began to soften and warp in my hand, becoming warm and yielding, like flesh. I dropped it with a shout. It hit the metal platform with a wet splat rather than the clang of plastic on steel. When I looked down, it wasn't a radio anymore, but a pulsing mass of tissue, veined and glistening. I scrambled down the ladder so fast I nearly fell. By the time I reached the bottom, I was gasping for breath, my heart pounding against my ribs. The broadcast room was no longer empty. A figure stood by the main console, tall, humanoid, but wrong in ways my mind struggled to process. Its proportions were slightly off, limbs too long, head too small. It wore what appeared to be an old technician's uniform, the kind that might have been standard in the 1970s when the tower was first built. It turned toward me and I saw its face, or rather the absence of a face. Where features should have been was a swirling vortex of static, like a television tuned to a dead channel. We found the frequency, it said, its voice coming not from the static void of its head but from the console beside it. The VU meter jumped with each word. The resonance between worlds. I raised my pistol. What are you? The creature tilted its head at an impossible angle. We are what waits between stations, between signals, between thoughts. The static of its non-face rippled. We've been trying to come through for so long. Come through from where? My voice sounded distant to my own ears, as if I were hearing it on a radio with poor reception. The spaces you can't perceive. The gaps in your reality. It took a step toward me, moving with a jerky, strobing motion like someone filmed in stop motion. Your world broadcasts outward constantly, all those signals passing through our domain. We followed them back, I fired. The bullet passed through the figure as if it were smoke, embedding itself in the wall behind. The creature didn't react. Physical laws are just another frequency, it said. We're learning to tune them out. More figures began to appear, flickering into existence around the room. All wore different clothing from different eras, but all had the same static void where their faces should be. I recognized the uniforms of radio operators from World War II, telegraph workers from the early 1900s, modern IT technicians. Every communication technology you've ever created has opened doors, the first creature continued. Telegraph lines, radio waves, television broadcasts, fiber optic cables, cell phone signals, each one thinning the barrier a little more. I backed toward the door but found my way blocked by more of the entities. What do you want? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. To consume, said one figure in the uniform of a 1950s radio announcer, its voice coming from a dusty speaker in the corner. To experience, to become, added another, this one dressed as a modern satellite technician, its words emanating from my phone in my pocket. The first creature approached until it was directly in front of me. Up close I could see that the static wasn't just visual, it was a tear in reality itself, a window into something my mind couldn't comprehend. Your species broadcasts its consciousness outward, it said. We've been listening, learning. And now we're responding. It reached for me with a hand that flickered between solid and translucent. I tried to back away but found myself frozen in place. Your mind will make an excellent receiver, it said. Its hand passed into my forehead without resistance. I felt a cold invasion, like ice water being injected directly into my brain. Static filled my vision, my hearing, my thoughts. I saw what they were then, entities from a dimension adjacent to ours but fundamentally incompatible with it. They existed in the spaces between our reality, in the static between radio stations, in the milliseconds between digital signals. They had been aware of us since humans first began broadcasting our presence beyond the range of our voices, and they had been trying to get in ever since. The abandoned radio tower wasn't broadcasting signals outward. It was receiving something inward. The old analog equipment, with its physical dials and vacuum tubes, created a more stable bridge than modern digital technology. They had found this place, this forgotten relic of human communication, and turned it into a doorway. When the creature withdrew its hand, I collapsed to the floor. The static in my mind receded, but didn't disappear completely. It was like a radio playing just at the edge of hearing, always there, impossible to tune out completely. You understand now, said the entity, its voice now coming from my own mouth, though my lips hadn't moved. You're part of the broadcast. I managed to crawl backward, away from the creatures. They watched, but made no move to stop me. I pulled myself to my feet and staggered out of the broadcast room, down the hall, and out of the building. The sun was setting, casting long shadows from the tower. I stumbled to my truck and fumbled with the keys, glancing back every few seconds, expecting to see the static-faced entities following me. They didn't follow. They didn't need to. As I drove away, the radio in my truck turned on by itself. Static hissed from the speakers, and beneath it I heard my own voice. We're coming through, all of us, and you helped open the door. I drove straight to Millport and burst into the sheriff's office, babbling about creatures in the radio tower. Sheriff Dalton, who'd known me for 3 years as the quiet caretaker who came to town once a month for supplies, looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. They sedated me at the local clinic and called Karen at Meridian. When I woke up the next morning, she was there, along with a man who introduced himself as Dr. Weller, a psychiatrist from the VA hospital in Portland. PTSD can manifest in unusual ways, he explained gently. Isolation can exacerbate symptoms. Auditory and visual hallucinations aren't uncommon. It wasn't a hallucination, I insisted, but even to my own ears, my story sounded insane. Karen smiled sympathetically. We've had a team check out the tower thoroughly. There's nothing unusual there, Mr. Reeves. The equipment is dormant, just as it has been for years. They wouldn't show themselves to a team, I said. They're waiting. Gathering strength, Dr. Weller exchanged a glance with Karen. I think it might be best if you come with me to Portland for a few days, just for observation. I knew what that meant. Once they had me in a psychiatric facility, my credibility would be zero. Anything I said about the tower would be dismissed as the ravings of a mentally ill veteran. I agreed to go with them, pretending to accept their explanation. When Dr. Weller went to complete the paperwork, I slipped out the clinic's back door and stole a car from the parking lot. I had to get back to the tower, not to confront the entities, but to destroy their gateway. The sun was high when I reached Blackwood Point. The tower stood as it always had, seemingly innocent in the daylight. I had stopped at a gas station on the way, filling 2 gas cans. It wasn't a sophisticated plan, but fire tends to solve a lot of problems. As I approached the broadcast building, my stolen car's radio switched on. Static, then my own voice again. We're already out. The tower is just one door, there are millions of others. I ignored it and continued forward, gas cans in hand. Inside, the broadcast room was empty of the entities, but the equipment was active again, lights blinking, meters jumping, reels turning. I began dousing everything with gasoline. As I worked, the static grew louder, filling the room. The temperature dropped, the entities were returning. "This won't stop us," said a voice from a speaker. "We're in the signals now." "All the signals, maybe," I replied, emptying the last of the gas, "but it's a start." I struck a match as the first of the static-faced figures began to materialize. The gasoline ignited with a whoosh, flames racing across the floor and up the consoles. The entities shrieked, a sound like feedback through an amplifier, as the fire engulfed their gateway. I backed out of the building, watching as the flames spread quickly through the dry, old structure. Black smoke billowed upward, enveloping the tower itself. In the smoke, I could see faces forming and dissolving, hundreds of them, all with the same static void features, all screaming silently. I should have left then, but I stood transfixed, watching the destruction. That's why I was still there when the sheriff's cruiser pulled up, followed closely by Karen's company SUV. They arrested me, of course. Arson, destruction of property. Grand theft auto. I didn't resist. In a way, I was relieved to be taken into custody, to be surrounded by people, by noise, by the constant chatter of police radios and human voices that might drown out the static still humming at the edges of my awareness. That was 2 weeks ago. I'm in the county jail now, awaiting transfer to a federal facility. They think I'm crazy, which is fair. Sometimes I think I'm crazy too, but then I'll catch a glimpse of a guard's face momentarily dissolving into static. Or I'll hear voices coming from the television in the common room when it's turned off. Little things, easy to dismiss, easy to attribute to stress or mental illness. Karen visited yesterday. She sat across from me in the visitation room, immaculately dressed as always, her expression a careful mask of professional concern. "The tower's gone," she said, "but we're already rebuilding, improved design, digital equipment. Better range." "You can't," I said. "You don't understand what you're doing." She smiled, and for a moment, just a moment, her face flickered, revealing the static void beneath. "Oh, but we do," she said, her voice layered with that familiar hiss. "We understand perfectly." She left before I could respond. The guard who came to take me back to my cell had the same momentary flicker when he turned away from the security camera. They're everywhere now, in every broadcast, every transmission, every signal, the static between stations, the loading icon on a streaming video, the brief audio dropout during a phone call. They're coming through, and there's nothing I can do to stop them. By trying to close one door, I think I may have inadvertently opened many more. Sometimes at night, I press my ear against the wall of my cell and listen. Beyond the normal sounds of the jail, I can hear it, the breathing static, growing stronger, more confident. And sometimes, in the brief moment between sleeping and waking, I can hear what they're saying now. Not just to me, but to all of us. Keep broadcasting, keep transmitting, keep connecting. We're almost there. We're so hungry.